and welcome to this talk on cryptography and its future. I am Prashant Kumar, and I am very honored to get a chance and speak on the Pwnverse conference. Well, as my topic is about the cryptography and its future, you must have assumed that I am some kind of the mathematics genius, or I kind of love mathematics. Well, yes, cryptography has a lot of things to do with the mathematics, but it's way beyond the mathematics as well. And that's exactly what we are going to do is we are going to simplify the entire cryptography and we'll see about its future today. Hi again, this is Prashant Kumar. Well, I am a co-founder of a deep tech company called as AtharvaAI, where we do research on different technologies and we create product around it. So apart from that, I am also a visiting faculty and professor at various startups, edtech startups, universities as well. Okay, so cryptography. Well, cryptography is a very fine subject altogether. Well, it existed way beyond the computers were on here. So in the Pwnverse, we are talking about the computers, we are talking about the security, we are talking about the hacking and stuff. So all we are talking about is the generation when the computers came into existence. But the cryptography is one of the topic which is existing from way beyond like something around 2000 BC old, which is like 4000 5000 years old from here, and that's how old the cryptography is. And that's why it's very fascinating to see how the changes of the cryptography has been so far, and why cryptography is still the heart of all the other organization. Everything that you develop around, you still can't ignore cryptography because it's so embedded inside. And that's why this cryptography is so fascinating to me, and I'm hoping that after today's topic, this cryptography will be fascinating to you as well. So let's talk about a bit of the era of the cryptography. Well, as I mentioned, the cryptography basically one of the first known evidence of the cryptography was around 1900 BC, which was in the Egypt. It was in the tomb of the nobleman Khnumhotep II. Sorry to say, it's very difficult to name. Anyway, so then again, moving forward, you can find the traces of the cryptography in around 200 and 300 BC, where there is a script called as Kama Sutra, which is all about the sex and stuff. And it was in India, so definitely it actually made sure how the couples basically used to communicate with each other without revealing the information to the other party. And then it came across around 100 BC. It was time of the Julius Caesar, which was one of the emperor, and he used to use this this fascinating encryption, which was a very simple one to communicate among their army. And it was a simple substitution cipher. So how did it look like? It was a simple, as I mentioned, it's a simple substitution cipher. That means what it used to do is it basically used to convert. It used to convert the letters with a substitute the letters with another letter. Let's say you have A, B, C, D, and stuff, right? A lot of. So I used to convert is, let's say A basically got converted to B, B got converted to C, C to D, and you can say like it's a kind of a rotation which is basically you are doing across. So you can say like the rotation 1. In the similar fashion, if you write rotation 3, A will become something like D, right? Because A to B to 1 rotation, A to C will be 2 rotation, A to D will be rotation 3, right? And then you go to B, E, C to F, D to F, G, and stuff like that, right? It keeps on going on. And then whenever you want to, let's say encrypt something, okay, for example, I want to encrypt THE, so T will be converted based upon what the rotational scheme you are using. It will be converted to that. H will get converted to or will be substituted by something. E will be getting substituted by something. Here the important critical point over here is that yes, it looks like a very random one. Yes, it is a random one. And during that time, like around 100 BC, when the people were not aware of so much about the cryptography, this looked like a very fascinating thing of how you are going to communicate between two people or two parties, right? But the biggest problem was if the if someone is trying to intercept the message and if they come to know about this encryption scheme, like this algorithm that you are using, hey, look, this is just a substitution cipher that you are talking about. If they somehow come to know about this, well, the problem is that no matter how many encryption that you want to do it, or you want to do the substitution, you do it, people will actually come to know about what you're doing. So the biggest challenge in this sort of the thing was that you were supposed to protect the algorithm itself, right? So protecting the algorithm was more important. So over the period of time, there were crypto analyst guy who came across and were trying to break this encryption scheme. And in order to make it strong, they were making some modifications. They were coming out with a new technique as well, and kept on working across till the World War One, right? Till the World War One, it was the same old story of the the substitution cipher or the transposition cipher as well. It was all about coming across with a scheme, but the core was still the same. That the algorithm that you are putting across needs to be secured. You cannot reveal the algorithm. If the algorithm was revealed, the entire thing was done. But the problem is with the algorithm is that if the algorithm is gone, it takes time to create a new algorithm, right? It's not like, hey, look, I created the algorithm right now, and then okay, I'll create a new algorithm right away, right? It's not how it works, because once you create the algorithm, you have to transfer the algorithm. Everyone needs to know about the algorithm. It's just a hell lot of process which is actually going across. So the problem, this was exactly the problem at that time. Well, they actually moved on from this part, and they said, okay, look, well, the only way that we can have a proper cryptography, proper encryption is if we can make the algorithm public. That means everyone knows about the algorithm. But still, even if the everyone knows about the algorithm, still they won't be able to decrypt the message. Well, that was a very, very big challenge. And fortunately, that was the time when the rise of the Hitler was on, and the Hitler army, they actually developed something called as the Enigma Machine. And I call this as the era of the mechanical cryptography. What they had is like a box, and as you can see, they had a box, a lot of rotors, lamp boards, like keyboards, some blackboards and stuff. The idea was that they used to create some rotate these rotors, have some special keys in place, okay, the special letters in place, and based upon that you type the your message, and it will give you the output. Now, even if someone has the access to this Enigma machine, they won't be able to get it because they need to know what was the secret message which was typed, right? And this idea of the secret message, which was actually very, very important, even though if you have the entire box with you, you still need to have this message, right? This actually gave birth of the concept of the keys. And now it entirely changed the way that the cryptography we were looking at. So now the if you draw the block diagram of the encryption, it became, for example, let's say you have this is an algorithm block. Okay, so you have this plain text, which is the message you can see in a clear text format. And earlier it was plain text passing through an algorithm. Were getting a cipher text. But after the the concept of the keys, the algorithm was made public. And this key was very, very important. It was like you can call this key as a password, a normal password that you can say. Okay, you can call them out. So this key was very, very vital for this entire thing to work, because now if you don't have the key, you won't be able to get the message back. So the decryption would something look like that: you pass the cipher text, you pass it to the algorithm, you need to have the access to the key, and then you need to have you get the plain text back. So this was like more or less. Now we can have this analogy in a very, very simple form, in which let's say I give you a important item, and I said, hey, look, you have to keep this important item very, very safe. So what do? You take that important item, you go inside your room, you put that important item or important box, whatever I gave you, inside the room, you lock the room with a key. And now the only way to access that room is if I do have the access to the key, right? If I do have the access to the key, only then I can go inside and have the access to the entire thing. Well, that is exactly where the entire scheme was working across. Like this is the simple analogy. Now, this was the time of how these shifts were working around, and slowly and slowly, after the World War II, there were new shifts in the technology which were happening, and that was a time when the computers were coming. Like, wow, the computers are coming across. Like, there were new researches and developments were made in the semiconductor systems, and that was a time when the people realized, hey, look, why don't we just steal this idea? I'm not still sorry to say, but I mean, why don't we just take this idea and create something, something like the encryption scheme for our system itself, like the modern system, the modern technology that we are having across, right? And that is exactly where the concept of the era of the modern cryptography started, and the concept of the symmetric key encryption and the asymmetric key encryption started. Well, symmetric key encryption is just like what we saw in the previous Enigma machine. It was just like you have a algorithm with you. You pass on the plain text. You have the key, right? And you get the ciphertext. Now, in order to get the ciphertext back, the importance of this symmetric key encryption is that you need to use the same key that you use to decrypt, right? If you call it as a KS, you need to use a KS in order to decrypt the message. And we call this that means there is a symmetry of the key in both the encryption and decryption process, and that's why we call it as a symmetric key encryption. And then it had a division of the stream ciphers and the block ciphers. Well, stream ciphers, I mean, obviously there were two kinds of this symmetric encryption. One is a stream cipher, one is a block cipher. Stream ciphers are where a stream of characters are being passed and every single character is encrypted with the corresponding algorithm. While the block cipher is where you pass on a certain characters, okay, you convert them into a small block. Let's say I passed like, hey, okay, I want to have encrypt this text as modern cryptography, and I say like, look, I'm going to have a block of 4 characters. So what I do is like I converted them onto a block of 4 characters, okay, and then yeah, do some padding, okay, and then try to encrypt every single block. Now, this is like a more secured way than the stream cipher, but with the security, there comes with the complications as well. One of the complications with the block ciphers was that if there is no network reliability, then there will be a huge information loss in the block ciphers. Well, this 4 bytes are just, I mean, the 4 characters which I mentioned, like it's just for an example. Okay, in reality, it's like 128-bit, 192-bit, 256-bit, a larger size. Okay. Now, so what was it like? Why does it happen with the stream, like the network lag? The thing is, like, let's say that you're making a phone call and there is some network lag. And because of the network lag, there was a loss of 1 character. Well, according to block cipher, since everything is working on the block, that means it's not just 1 character which is lost, it's just the entire block is lost. So entire block will not be received onto the other side. Right. On the stream cipher, since it's like individual characters, so if just a M is lost, still the other characters are received. So that's why if you observe the GSM network, in the GSM, they use the A5 encryption, which is like a stream ciphers. While in the case of the block ciphers, which is like all the other encryption over the internet we talk about, we use the block cipher, like for example, like the AES, the TES, IDNX and stuff like that. Well, this entire scheme still had a problem. It's so good that we are finally getting into something betterment, right? The encryption, decryption. But the entire problem still had, like the entire scheme still had a problem. The problem was the key sharing problem. Then let's try to analyze this from these 2 gentlemen. Okay, sorry, the one, Alice and the Bob, like 2 people. For the classical people in the cryptography, Alice and Bob decided to have a communication between each other. So Alice, like like a normal cryptography, like a normal symmetric key, encrypted a message, okay, with the key KS, and then send the ciphertext to Bob, right? Algorithm, and then the Bob needs to get a plain text back, right? Now the problem is, how does the Alice share the key with the Bob? Given that this entire channel is a not secure channel, right? That was the biggest challenge. If the channel is not secured, then what about it? How can we actually make it work? Let's say like the Eve, who is the who is eavesdropping, will have the access to the since they already know about the algorithm is public, as I mentioned. Eve will have the access to a ciphertext. Eve will also have the access to a the key, so Eve will basically get it. So the idea is like the only way to pass through is that Alice has to use a entirely different channel, maybe through an email, maybe through another way, whatever the channel is, but they have to somehow send that channel, right? So that's like a cumbersome. That's like very difficult task. Well, and that's exactly this key sharing problem was solved by the asymmetric key encryption. Well, in the case of the asymmetric key encryption, you have two keys with you. So now this entire scheme basically changed. So now what Alice will do is Alice will say, hey, look, Bob, I want to share a message with you. Bob knows his role. So the Bob starts with the first process, which is a key generation process. And a lot of mathematics involved. We are not going to talk about the mathematics for now. Okay. We'll just, move from the mathematics for now. Okay, so the Bob starts with a key generation process and it generates a key pair. We call them as a public key. One is as a public key and one is a private key. Let me actually refer to this as K pub B and K PVTB. Well, K pub B is basically the public key of Bob and K PVTB is the private key of Bob. Okay. Now, as the name sounds, the public and the private key, the public key is actually public. That means everyone will have the access to this public key of Bob, even the Eve. Okay, even the Eve, even if any other party which is there in the network will have the access to the public key of the Bob. So Alice decide, hey, look, and the private key is private. That means like the Bob never shares this key with anyone else. So that key is with only with the Bob. Now, the beauty of this asymmetric key encryption is how does it work? That's actually the beauty, and that's actually the mathematics, the beauty of the mathematics behind it, and that's why I love the cryptography. It's so fascinating. Now, what happened is like this K. So Alice will say, "Hey Bob, I need to share a message with you. Can you give me your public key?" And the Bob is like, "Look, my public key is there. If you want, you just take it. Don't bother me with that, with those kind of stuff." So Alice, without bothering Bob, takes the public key, uses the public key of Bob, and creates a ciphertext, shares a ciphertext. The problem with this for the Eve is, since Eve also has the public key, but now Eve won't be able to use this public key to decrypt the message because this is how the key was generated. If one key is used for the encryption, the other key has to be used for the decryption purpose. The same key cannot be used for the decryption purpose. That's the beauty of the asymmetric key encryption. And that actually solves the entire problem because now, since Bob got the ciphertext, Bob is not worried about the public key. Bob will basically silently use his private key and get the plain text message back. Now, Eve, who already has the access to the ciphertext, has the access to the public key of Bob, also knows about the algorithm, right? Even if Eve has all the things with them, Eve will still not be able to decrypt the message. So that was the beauty of the asymmetric key encryption, how the key sharing problem was actually solved. Now in the asymmetric key encryption, you have a couple of examples like the RSA and the elliptical curve cryptography. Well, about the RSA. RSA is a simple mathematics that we talk about. RSA was created by three different mathematicians, reverse, Shamir, and Element. So three mathematicians came across with a scheme for too much of mathematics. Okay, but still let's quickly look at it. So they came across that, hey, look, we need to worry about two large prime number. We'll be choosing like two very, very large prime number, P and Q. Okay. And after choosing the two large prime numbers, what we are going to do is we are going to do a multiplication. And remember, when I said a large prime number, that means every single of this number has 100 plus digits. So large numbers. Okay, so large numbers. And now what they're basically doing is they are basically multiplying it and getting a value called as modulus, value of n. Okay. And then they're also communicating or kind of like calculating something called as the phi, which is p minus 1 into q minus 1. Okay. So all of these are calculated. Now, one more thing which is still left, which is the value of e. Now, e is supposed to be a prime number. E is again like a randomly selected prime number. We call it as an exponent. And the idea which is like obviously it's supposed to be a prime number. Apart from that, the ideal case is that e should lie between the value of p and phi. Sorry, my bad. That e should lie between the value of p and phi. Here we are considering p is a smaller number than q, definitely. Okay, so that's why I say like e should lie between p and phi. Now this gave a lot of clarity about this entire formula which was coming across. This gave a lot of clarity about how the things were working. So now we have the value of, now the key was generated, which is like the public key first. So public key basically comprises of the value of E and the value of N. This value of E and this value of N is the part of the public key. What about the private key? We generate the private key with the formula ED mod phi. Ask one. Why formula? Don't ask me, ask Euler. He's supposed to get blamed for all of this stuff. Anyway, that's actually good, like where he came across. Anyway, so this particular thing with the ed mod phi is very, very fascinating because now you know the value of e, you know the value of phi, and this is like an entire key generation process going on. Okay, and then you have the value of d as well. So this d is basically a private key. So now the private key component basically becomes the value of d, and the value of n is just like understood, n is everywhere. Okay. And then you start the encryption process. Let's say we have a message, plain text message M, and we want to encrypt this message. We want to get the ciphertext, right? That's the objective. So we use the public key component, which is the E and N. So which is like mod M to the power E mod N, right? And this kind of like gives us the value of C for us, which is kind of like very cool because now we can have it. While if we want to get the plain text back, what we do is we use the value of d mod n, right? That's simple, like that's exactly simple. Now here, well, everything is fine, everything mathematics and everything is fine, but here if you see in the perspective of Eve, let's try to see the perspective of an attacker. So for the attacker has the access to the public key, right? That means he gets the value of E and N. Well, for the private key, he already has the value of n. He just needs a value of d. Well, in order to get the value of d, he knows this is the formula, right? He has the access to the e from the formula. He knows about the formula e. All he does not know is what is the value of phi. But he can still know because he knows the formula. The formula of phi is p minus 1 into q minus 1, right? That's the formula of phi. Well, the formula of after the formula of the phi, what they can basically do is they will just use a simple term like p minus phi, p and q. So in order to get the value of phi, it needs to calculate the value of p and q. Now from the entire formula, we know that we can calculate the value of p and q if we can actually factorize the value of n. We already have the value of n, remember. So the entire security of the RSA lies on the fact if the attacker is able to factorize the value of n. It looks very, very simple mathematical problem, right? But it's possible. It is possible, given if you have the right equipment, right time and stuff. A lot of things are there. But with the current, since the numbers are so large, and with the current computation that we have, this becomes next to impossible. Okay, for now. And since you cannot factorize the value of p and q, factorize the value of n, and then cannot get the value of p and q, so the value of phi is safe, and hence the value of d is also protected. So that brings us to the conclusion, like why the asymmetric key encryption is safe in that matter. Well, there is one thing which I mentioned. If you didn't realize that, I told you, the problem lies if you can factorize the value of n or not, right? What if we can actually make some sort of the computers who is powerful enough and is smart enough to actually break this encryption, to actually factorize it, right? And given like how the trends of the computers are going on, supercomputers, we have quantum computers, and a lot of things are going across, it's totally possible. And that's why there's an entirely new paradigm shift in the cryptography that we look from now. So from like 10 years, almost a decade from here, you will see like this entire schema basically filling across because of the way that the development is going on. And that brings us to something called as how the future of the cryptography is going to look like. The future of the cryptography is the quantum cryptography. The future is the quantum cryptography. Now, what's a quantum? Well, quantum, the word quantum cryptography basically comes from the concept of physics. Yes, quantum physics. Yeah, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, where it says that the nature does not reveal everything about itself. It still has something to hide, right? So in the quantum cryptography, the entire shifted from mathematics to physics. And did I tell you like I love physics as well? So yeah, so that's the point as well. So how did it work with the quantum cryptography? So quantum says that here, look, there is always a one more stage of a stage. It's not just 0 and 1 which you can have, but more number of states can have, right? And because of this entire thing basically changes the way that the people are looking at, right? IBM is doing a very, very good research on the quantum cryptography. Just in case if you want to know about the quantum computers, there is a lecture by IBM. There's like a TED talk on by the IBM. I would recommend you guys to go ahead and watch about the quantum physics. What's the quantum physics? What do you mean by the quantum physics? What they? Anyway, so going back to the future, which says if you actually for example, let's say the RSA 2048 encryption, with the current computers that we have, it will take almost around 300 trillion years to crack the communication, right? But if you have a 4099 qubits powered quantum computer, it will just take like 10 seconds. We are far from reaching there, definitely, but it is possible. We are on the right stage. Who knows, what will happen. So see, that means these RSA scheme is not a future proof. And so post quantum, we need a quantum cryptography in place, which is protected from the quantum cryptography, right? So let's talk about the quantum cryptography in very, very small nutshell, okay? And if you guys are confused about the quantum cryptography, I will understand that you guys knew something, okay? Anyway, so we'll try to talk about the quantum cryptography, and then we'll try to see it in a very, very general analogy. Okay, just in case if you find it very, very difficult to deal with the quantum cryptography. Well, the quantum cryptography says that's not just 1 and 0. There are something called as a polarizer. Okay, so there are different states, and there are the states of the horizontal and the vertical. So what is that? Well, it says that when a number is being passed, or when the photon is being passed, okay, it does a spin. You can do a spin on those photons, and you can change the value, which says that either you have like this, right, the horizontal vertical one, or you can have something like this, the diagonal one, right, which states that if you have the vertical one, which is a Z1, if you have the horizontal, you call it as a 0. If it's like a this diagonal one, you call it 1, you call it a 0, right? This is like a computing thing, how this pin is basically working around. Now let's say if I have something like 1 1 0 0 1. Well, the idea can be that is this, it is again this, it can be like, for example, 0, right? So 0 can be 0 0 1. It can be this, right? Or it can be something like this. It can be like this 1, right? Still a 1. It can be like, okay, it's a say like this, it's like this, and it's again it's a 1, right? So you can have anything else. Well, and then there are endless possibilities out there. So this is like what do we mean by the basic, like this scheme, the things which work around. Now how the quantum cryptography is basically using this theory of this pin and making it work. So what they do is, let's say again the classic two people, Alice and Bob, they are now in future, and they are going to protect themselves from Eve, who also knows about quantum cryptography. So Alice and Bob, so Alice, what decided to do is, he decided to convert this entire thing, like all the messages, into bits, definitely passing through polarizer. So Alice selects a polarizer, like we call it as a, let's say we are calling. So this is like a the vertical, horizontal, vertical polarizer, and this is like a diagonal polarizer, right? This will have the 0 and 1 value. This will also have a 0 and 1 value. We already said that this is like a 1. This is like a 0. Okay, this is like again 1. This is like a 0, right? Okay. So what Alice will do is, like he will randomly select polarizer. Okay, and he will basically so from the polarizer, let's say Alice has a message. Okay, 1 1 0 0 1 1 1. Okay, 0, for example, whatever the message is. So what Alice decided to do is, Alice will randomly select the polarizer, and so okay, 1 is being passed from this polarizer. Maybe 1 again is passed through this polarizer, but 0 is passed through this polarizer. Again 0 is passed through. So what Alice is basically doing is randomly selecting and passing the value from this polarizer. And remember, this polarizer is kept secret. Okay, Alice is not revealing about this polarizer to anyone in the communication, right? And then Alice basically forms the value and then shares this particular value with Bob, right? Eve is listening to a communication and will assume that Eve also has this value. Okay, Eve also has this particular value. Okay, now Bob receives the value. Okay, now the question is, Bob, just like the Eve, Bob does not have the idea about the polarizer as well. So what Bob does is, Bob will also randomly select its own polarizer. Okay, randomly. Okay, so whatever the value that is getting from the Alice is randomly selecting any polarizer. Bob has no idea about what the polarizer that the Alice did. So Alice is like, Bob is basically converting them up. Okay, now this will entirely change the entire bit. Okay, and then Bob will also get some number. Let's say, like, here Alice is basically getting 1 1 1 0 1 0 1 1. Okay, so whatever the value Alice is getting, Bob also gets some value. Okay, 1 1 1 0 0 1. Okay, let's say 3 3 6 7 3 3 6 7. Okay, fine. Bob also gets some value. Okay, so Bob will do it, but Bob is not sure if this is the correct one or not. Definitely, it's not a correct one, right? It makes sense. So what Bob will do, Bob will actually share this message back to Alice. So now Alice receives this message, and Alice is smart. Alice will say, okay, I'm not going to reveal about I'm not going to tell you like what my polarizer is. But Alice will say, okay, fine, I will reveal one thing. I will tell you which of your bits are wrong. So let's say this particular thing. Okay. So here Alice will say, okay, look, the first is correct, the second is wrong. This is the first, again, it's a correct one. It's a correct one. It's a wrong. It's a wrong. It's a correct. Sorry, it's a wrong. My bad. So Alice reveals something. Now, if you see the probability is 50-50%, right? There's a probability of 50% being correct, and probability of 50% being wrong. Okay. Anyway, the idea is like, the idea is that in this particular case, now the Bob will actually, now the Alice will say, look, only these things are correct. And I'm just sharing you like, 111, like, these things with Bob. Now, just imagine the Eve also has the access to, Eve will also have the access to the message which is being sent by the Bob, and will also have the access to the, the message which is like the correct message which is being sent by the Alice. Here, the Bob again receives this message, will go back to them and will realize, okay, fine. So that means the way that we were trying with these numbers were correct. That means these are basically the part of my key. These are basically part of my key, and that's how then he will reevaluate his scheme and he will put this key in place. Well, this is basically used as a key. You will use this as a scheme back to it, and then will decrypt this entire message again. And Eve, since Eve never will have the access to the polarizer of the Bob, or will know about how the Bob actually did that, or will have no idea about how the Alice does that, Eve will still be in an entirely confused state all the time. So that's the cryptography for you. That's the quantum cryptography for you. Now I know, like, for some of you, this entire thing might be a bit difficult to understand. Well, I'll try to make a general analogy for that. Let's say Alice and Bob is communicating, and this time is like, it's just not a computer related in communication. So what Alice is basically trying to do is, Alice puts a important item document inside a briefcase and locks this briefcase, okay, and share this briefcase with Bob, okay, and Alice has the key. Remember, Alice has the one who has the key. Alice never shares the key. Okay, Eve is still. So Eve can also have the access to the briefcase, but it's of no use because Eve does not have the key. Well, Bob receives a briefcase. Bob also does not have the key. But Bob is smart, so what Bob will do is, Bob will put its key again. Okay, so this is like required for the Alice key, and this is like Bob's key. So Bob also put his lock on top of this briefcase. Okay, and then shares this briefcase again. Now Eve can have the access to the briefcase, but Eve needs like two key, right? The Alice key and the Bob key, because Bob is also not sharing its key. Now Alice receives this briefcase. Alice removes its lock and then share the briefcase back again. That means this briefcase now has only the Bob's key, like the Bob's lock. Eve still does not have any idea because Eve never got the access to this key again, right? And now Bob receives this briefcase. Now all Bob has to do is, Bob will use his key and get the item back. It's a flow of the communication, but this is like a simple analogy to understand how the quantum cryptography is basically working around. So now, from moving forward from here, if you are thinking of doing some research in the field of the cryptography, it's a high time that you focus your research on the quantum cryptography. It's an entirely different paradigm shift which is happening, and this is going to be the future of how we look the entire security of the system in place. Because remember, you cannot evade cryptography from security. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Joaquin. Thanks a lot for the entire Pwnverse team for inviting me up in this conference. I hope you guys had a some good pointers from my end. And yeah, if you guys have any question, feel free to ping me up. On the LinkedIn, anywhere on the Slack group, or anywhere you want. You just ping me up. Okay. Anyway, see you guys again. Bye.